Good morning. This is Blaine's World webcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We're now on Instagram, and you get more information and listen to previous shows at our website, which is behind me, www.blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Kathy Marcino with KMN Disc Consulting. And Kathy, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching you. Okay. And you're in Pennsylvania, right?
Doylestown, Pennsylvania, right outside, about 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia.
Okay, and that's how we met. We'll talk about that in a second. But I should mention that a lover of French language, Kathy thought she would pursue a career as a French interpreter for the U.S. State Department, deciding on a major in international relations. But she soon learned she didn't have the heart for politics. So she switched to marketing, loving everything about the sales process from brand creation, produced a product positioning to customer relations. She spent 10 years in pharmaceutical sales, successfully handling business development and creating and motivating sales teams that exceeded sales goals year after year. But then all of a sudden, and that's how I guess we met, you found something called the DISC behavioral model. And I have to ask you, I guess we'll do the Reader's Digest version of it. For those who don't know it, what is the DISC behavioral model?
It's a tool, essentially, that helps us identify what our strengths and blind spots are. So it's an assessment. And what it's designed really to ask a series of questions that says, this truly motivates me in a way that I'm going to be in the right role to be successful. So it's kind of a two-part tool, if you will. The first being creating that self-awareness piece that might not be as obvious to us a lot. So that, why am I acting this way? Why am I responding this way? Why am I good at this and not so good at that? And then the second part is, oh, okay, now that I know this about myself, how do I leverage that to work better with others and create better relationships, not just in the workplace, which is what I focus on, but personally as well. So it's a tool designed to create self-awareness and create better relationships with others.
So how did you discover it?
That was the most succinct I think I've ever given, by the way. I discovered it back in the day when I was leading my own sales team. Someone came in and this was a one-day training for me. And my head was just like, wow. It was, it wasn't rocket science. It was very simple. And it was easy to understand and easy to apply. And I thought, this is great. And so I took all of that when I was hiring, when I was trying to motivate my own staff, when I was trying to motivate myself. I said, this is really great. When I went out on my own, about, I guess it'll be 9 years now, I said, I want to be certified in that particular tool because I saw it as incredibly valuable and impactful for the workplace.
Now, who should be using this tool then? You said for workplace.
Everybody on the planet. Everybody that wants to communicate effectively with someone else. But my particular clients that I work with are sales leaders, sales managers, business owners, business leaders, anybody who's creating a team, building a product, anyone who wants to get their message out in a way that resonates with their customer and also has an effective team, a productive team, a cohesive team. This is the tool to use to do that.
And I guess that segues right into how I think we met. Initially, I'm in an organization, Dementia Society of America, and the leader of that, Kevin Jameson, had the great idea that I guess he wanted everybody to explain what happened. He wanted everybody to take the test, and then how was he going to use it?
He wanted to fire every one of you. And then I said, wait, let me see if I can help before you do that. Kevin and I were actually on the board of directors at the Central Bucks Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, sure.
Here in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And so we've known each other for a little over a year. And unfortunately, I lost my father this past about 8 months or so ago to dementia. And so we kind of started talking, and he told me a little bit about his team and how the different groups are across the country, different stages of their own careers, And he was trying to say, you know what, how can I communicate my message and my team's message effectively with everyone else's style? How can I lead this very diverse, multicultural team in an effective way? And so we started talking, and he said, how about if we have the team do assessments, and then we can have them see what their style is. And what I mean by that is what motivates them, what drives them to react and respond in a certain way, how they prefer to communicate, how they prefer to lead, how they react and respond to change. This is all invaluable information for a business owner, so that when they're speaking to not only their team, but their customers at large, in his case, the folks who are giving donations, you want to make sure you're getting your message out there in the right way possible.
Now, what was interesting about this, or I should ask you, had you ever worked with other nonprofits before?
I have.
Okay, because
I have a lot.
Because I found it fascinating that I had a vague recollection. I took it in some context, maybe 20 years ago. It's been around for a while, by the way. How many years has it been around? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, over 75.
Okay. So somehow I vaguely recall taking it 20 years ago. And then Kevin mentioned taking it this past year. I said to myself, wow, why even bother? And so you were great. You kind of really encouraged me to take it. I really appreciate that. So did Kevin. I took it, and wow, was it eye-opening, but what so amazed me about it is it's so on target. And explain how that's possible. In other words, I just answered a series of questions, but by answering the questions, they really helped explain, I guess, my behavior and other people's behavior. How is that possible?
It's the secret sauce, right? If you remember the questions, they're designed in such a way that they're tricky. And so there's only 4 answers, but you may say, oh my God, I can't decide between these 3. And it's designed that way to really get to, one of them is, am I a people or a task-oriented individual? What is my style? Am I more focused on the task at hand, what needs to be done, and the results? Or am I more focused on the people, the interaction, and the relationship? And so even if it's 51% to 49%, those questions are designed to say, this is the way, this is how you're wired. And so that's really what makes it spot on. And I don't think I've had, in the hundreds, almost probably 1,000 assessments that I've done, I may have had maybe 3 or 4 that said, this is not me. This is not me at all. And I was like, I didn't take the test, you did.
Well,
I didn't change your answer. So
talk, Kathy, about then how somebody uses this. So in other words, and talk about even the Dementia Society of America, because I really appreciated how you did it. And you did it with 2 groups of people, if I recall. I was only involved in one, but then after you worked with kind of the officers and the executive board, I understand you also worked with volunteers as well?
we did. And what was interesting and really cool for me, because one of the groups I was able to do in person, which I like, I get my fuel from interacting too. So, and I missed that a lot when we were in COVID. So I was appreciative of that. But a couple of things, he had brought in a new person. And so the day of the training was her first day.
Oh, really?
So I'm like, oh, she's either going to come back tomorrow or she's not. So there was a little pressure there. But it was interesting to see, based on what their strengths were, and then the results of their assessment, it was great for Kevin to say, do I have the right people in the right role? So that's a lot of how we use it. It's not the be all end all tool, because there's so many different things that you use to onboard a new person. But it does give some insight and a piece of information that you wouldn't normally get from a resume, where you've got all those hard skills, or a job interview or a phone interview, but you get that extra piece of what really motivates that person. Because I want to make sure that they're thriving and that they're doing quality work. That's what I hired them to do. So I want to make sure that if this is a super people person, I'm not going to put them in the back room with the computer and their door closed. I'm going to make sure that they're out front where I can leverage their strengths. So that's a really good reason. That's kind of a 90% of the reasons why we use DISC are the folks in the right role and leverage their strengths and their natural talents.
but I so much enjoyed going through the process with you. There were two things that come to mind. One is the fact that as we were doing it, we also had Kevin's wife, who's also an officer of the Dementia Society of America. But
Yeah.
boy, she said everything was spot on. So interesting to watch the two of them talk about each other and see each other, I guess, in a different context. Something that you never think about until you actually go through the assessment.
Well, it's funny because I hadn't met her prior,
Right.
but he's alluded to her in some other conversations, and I thought she is definitely opposite of you. And then when we did the assessment, they couldn't have been more opposite. And this is really interesting, and this comes up a lot in my work. People think I have to hire someone, or I want to work with someone who's exactly like me. And I can't even tell you how many times that backfires. And so what happens is, on paper, you think, well, this person is great because we can complement each other and we have different skill sets and different strengths that are really going to make us work well together. Unless you don't understand how they operate, then it's conflict. So they complement each other so well, and they know when to speak, and they know when to shut up, and they know when to say, you know what, I'm going to defer to you on this one because you're the expert. And let me just give you my perspective because you may not have thought about it. And so I saw a lot of that with Kevin and Ann.
By the way, you're giving me an idea here, and I don't know
Uh-oh.
if it's been the case, but do companies use this also before they hire people? In other words,
Oh,
to have,
sure.
and
Yes.
that'd be fascinating to have a group of people and then go through the assessment. I guess it would be helpful to the person hiring to give some ideas, like you said, not necessarily the mirror image of you, but not necessarily
Yeah.
the complete opposite. How can it be used in a hiring standpoint?
I work a lot with staffing organizations.
Right.
And so it may come down to 2 to 3 candidates that they've interviewed. They may have interviewed them multiple times and they really can't decide. And they'll say, can we do an assessment? So we'll send the assessment out. I'll review it with them and I'll say, because I don't want to know anything going in. So when I see the assessment, I kind of know what role I think is right for that person. But then when they say, hey, I'm hiring this, I'm looking for a salesperson, I'll say, you know what? Based on these results, I don't know if this person's right for that role. If you are hiring for this role, keep this person in mind. But I'm not going to put someone who is, their strengths are facts and figures and creating
Right.
manuals, and someone who is just focused on finance or IT. I'm not going to put them as a cold call salesperson. That's not going to work. And
What,
so staffing agencies will, like I had said earlier, the DISC tool is just one tool that HR departments have at their disposal when they're looking for new hires. So it's just one additional little piece that might just say, I'm going to choose this candidate over this one.
The other thing I found fascinating was the fact that you were very nice about this, and so was Kevin. You let me run my wife through it also,
Oh,
and she
yeah.
she heard me speaking to you on the call, and she was really interested in it, and she wanted to go through it, and that was really interesting. But it was so interesting, I think I told you, Kathy, that I went through it with you. You sent me the results, and then she went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and she agreed like almost with everything. She making all sorts of notes. Let's do
Yep.
this or let's try it. But it was so I was fascinated by that she enjoyed reading it as much, and then she enjoyed going through the process. And I'm curious too, even in that. I guess we weren't the only couples, Kevin and Ann. I'm sure there have been lots of other couples go through this. But is that something that happens every so often?
Oh, yeah.
Couples go through it?
They do. I worked with a couple of business partners
Right.
who weren't married, or they weren't couples per se, but they were business partners. So I've had that. And then I've also had married couples that also run businesses. And that can be a little dicey. So I can only go so far with them, and then they're going to have to figure the rest out on their own. I can give my suggestions and say, but you had one thing is, Blaine, you have to be really open to this. It's that self-awareness piece. You don't all of a sudden you may see the results and say, that is me, but I wish it wasn't, or that is me, but I guess I see why I would have reacted that way. And I now that I know this about myself, I think the next time I have this particular conversation or fill in the blank, I'm going to choose these words, or I'm going to use this tone with that person. So
Now,
it's pretty insightful, especially for couples.
now, do you work with people afterwards, after they take the test, then work with them in terms of implementing it and using it?
I do, because I mean, it's always fun when you have a sales training, right? It takes you out of the office, everybody
Right.
gets together. And then, more often than not, the training binder goes on the shelf and you never look at it again. And so within 30 days of every client, I have a follow-up. And we talk about what's changed, what hasn't changed, how did you utilize the information? If you didn't, why? If you did, how did it work? And then more often than not, I may start working with a few individuals one-on-one, because they'll say, you know what, I think I'd like to, I'm grooming this person maybe for a leadership position. I may want you to work with them one-on-one, or someone saying, I think I could use my own professional development. Can we work on one-on-one too? So there's always follow-up, because there's always changes. And so I've had one client that I started 5 years ago, and every time there's a new person, they'll call. So I may not hear from them for 6 to 8 months, and then I'm working with them for 6 months, and then I might not hear from them again for another 3 months, and then we're back in it together. So as their organization changes, they need to know, are they bringing in the right people? Are they, is it time to let some folks go? And that has happened as a result of some of my trainings. And it was kind of that one additional piece of information where, you know what, we gave this person a performance plan, or we gave them 90 days, and where if they were able to achieve X, Y, and Z, but if they didn't. And so, sometimes it's worked out that way, but I think more often than not, it's for the best for both parties. That person probably wasn't in the right job to begin with,
By the way, we should talk
because
also,
if they were, they would have been more successful.
we should also talk about you're talking about this assessment, but it's actually kind of a painless thing to go through. It's actually a fun thing to do. And
Yeah.
more significantly, I was pleased with this. It doesn't take that long. How long does it typically take?
I mean, and it's interesting, if you look at the different personality styles, one personality style will do it in 5 minutes.
Right.
It's only 20 questions, right? 24 questions. You could have somebody take a half an hour, because I think some people get hung up, and I try to emphasize this at the beginning of any training I do, or consulting that I do, but it's people get hung up when they hear test, right? Or assessment. And it has that negative connotation, right? Well, I better make sure that I'm answering in a way that I want to be perceived as a good guy, or, that I'm answering in the way that they want me to answer, not necessarily how I do. And they're the ones that you can tell blew the test, because when you see the results, it's like, that doesn't make any sense. And so you can tell they overthink it. And so it could take anywhere from it shouldn't take any more than 20 minutes, really.
Well, as you said, almost that was my process beginning it. I'm starting to take it. I was thinking too much about it. Then I remember your instructions, and I was trying to analyze what would it mean, what's it saying, or what's Kevin going to think. But what's so good about it, you can't really beat it.
No.
It's like you can try to, I guess, or think it out, but it lends itself to, whatever the results are the results. You can't change it too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Give just maybe one example, or two examples, if you have it in front of you, of the kinds of questions that they're asked. I don't want to ruin the whole thing, but for example, I have 20 questions in front of me. Give an example of one of the questions. What does it ask?
Oh, a lot of times, it's really about, why aren't I getting along with this person? What is it? I've said the same to 3 different people, and 2 out of the 3 are getting it, but this one I'm really struggling with. Why? And really how, your personality style has a real impact on how you communicate. And so along with that comes different preferences of behavior. And so a good example, I think, is there are some folks that love to talk. And that's their, mode of communication. No matter what, they're going to pick up the phone, even if you don't want them to, they're going to want to do that. And then you have people that just want to read the email. Just send me the email and tell me what you want me to do. Well, if you've got a talker and a reader, and you don't know that that's the preference of for each other's way of communicate or mode of communication, or the most effective mode of communication, that's where the conflict's going to be. So when you look at the style results, it's, oh, okay, that makes sense. This person didn't read that long email. You lost their attention in the first 3 sentences. And then this person that's getting the really long email, it's, I don't even know what they're asking me to do. It's just one long sentence. So how can I get my message across? How can I get through to this person? And the first thing is, and this is always hard to hear, it's hard for me to hear too, but not everyone thinks like you. Not everyone has the same level of urgency as you. And not everybody's going to view the same thing with the same level of importance as you. So once you can get through that, which I struggle with personally, to be honest, you say, okay, I know that this person loves to just chat. So I'm going to say, hey, is texting the best way to reach you? Okay. Well, guess what? I would like it in writing from you. And so if you could include this type of information for me so that we're not going back and forth in just sound bites, I think we'll be able to answer this question and solve this problem, fill in the blank a lot sooner, more productively, and hopefully without any conflict.
One of the things I hear you saying, and it's a really good point, is that how do you find this out? Well, you can find out through the assessment, but something also encourages you to just ask that question or speak to people about it, rather than just guessing, what you think. Or, I've talked about this off the air, about the best way to communicate with people. The best, I contend, and you may agree with it, but I contend the best way to communicate with people is how they want to be communicated, so.
Exactly.
And how do you find out? You just ask them, but so many people never ask. They just, I guess, they just assume.
They don't ask because either they don't take the time or they assume that they feel the same way as we do. And so it's, well, if I like this, then certainly you should like this way, and you're going to react and respond in the same way that I do. But one of the key takeaways from this assessment is, the taker of the assessment, how do I prefer to communicate, and how does that person prefer to be communicated with? I think that's kind of what you're just saying there, the
Right.
knowing how they want to be communicated with. And that's really huge. But you bring up an interesting point when you say people don't ask the questions. People don't ask the questions a lot because they're afraid of conflict and rocking the boat. And so people don't ask questions because they're like, oh, you know what? I don't like this. I don't want any tension. I'm just going to stay quiet. And hopefully this is going to resolve itself. And so I always encourage, ask the question, have the difficult conversation. Your shoulders are wrapped around your ears. Try to lower your shoulders a little bit, because, I think we've been taught over the years that conflict is something to never talk, to shy away from, right? We don't want to do that. We want to shove things under the rug and everything. We'll just pretend that it's fine and it'll go away on its own. And what I encourage my clients to do, especially my business leaders, is to have those conversations, be open to others' opinions and ideas. And you would be surprised that it's not always negative, and that's really a catalyst for growth, individual growth and organizational growth. And so ask those questions.
It reminds me of my experience with my daughter, and same thing what you're talking about. My daughter, for example, would never return my phone calls, wouldn't return my emails, whatever. But once I knew she liked texting, and I hated texting at the time, but within 2 minutes she'd respond, so in terms of working with her, relationship improved tremendously once we both knew each other. She likes emails, she likes texting, so I text her, and it's very helpful to learn that, just to pick that up.
I have to give a shout out now to a gentleman. His name is Dr. Robert Rohm, Rohm, and he's based in Atlanta. And he started the company that I'm certified with. It's called Personality Insights. And he started this company as a direct result of, he has 4 daughters. And he had one daughter, I won't say her name, that he was like
Okay.
this when she was a teenager and he could not get through to her. Started having different conversations with, he was a consultant and a businessman. So he started having conversations with some of his colleagues. He started to learn about this information and about the DISC tool. He didn't create the DISC tool, it's been around forever. But what he did was take it and create his version or his model, mostly for the workplace, but it was as a result of his relationship with his daughter. So that's
Must,
interesting that you say that.
okay, and tell him next time you speak to him, tell him we were talking about him, and we
I
send
will.
him this clip, and it's very, very similar to my story. What must be very exciting for you too, as a trainer, as a head of your own company, is when you see this, you implement it with a company, and then you actually see the change, or you see that must really be exciting for you when you see a company making changes as a result.
I get so excited and I get exhausted actually because I get so invested and then I'll be done a client call, I'm like, oh my gosh, what just happened? I felt like I ran a marathon. But again, it's, what we're talking about is not astrophysics here. We're talking about very simple characteristics and traits that each of us have inherently and how we're hardwired. But we don't have the luxury to self-reflect as often as we should. And so when we take the time to actually see this information and everyone's like, oh my God, yeah, that makes sense. That's why she's acting that way. That's why he said that. That's why I'm pissed off right now. So it's when I hear people have those aha moments, that's just like, my job here is done.
And I'll just reiterate or emphasize what you said, because when I went through the training with you, same kind of thing. I had those aha moments, and it was so
Yeah.
exciting. There was only a small group we were with. I guess there's no limit in terms of you could do this with small group. What's the range of groups you typically work with?
My largest group was 144.
Okay, that's a bunch. And what's the smallest?
That was a one.
One. Okay. But I'm saying is, but just what you said, it was so cool that, again, I didn't have much. I wasn't overly excited about taking it or going through the process. Again, the 20 years ago. But as I went through it, had the aha moments, and my wife certainly did. And it was even better working with you afterwards. It was such a fun. So that's when I had the idea I wanted to do a webcast with you. It was actually fun though. It wasn't. It was
Yeah,
just we had a good time with it. But boy, was that open up a lot of certainly opened my eyes and some other people's eyes. And
that's great. I thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. And I think you were open to it. There's some people that roll their eyes and go, oh, like I said, I've taken this 10 times. Yeah, but did you find it interesting that now you took it at the 10th time and that you haven't changed? That should tell you something.
But wait, does that happen? Do people take it multiple times, and do they change over over taking it?
No, no. You'll find that when we measure the behaviors, we look at two factors. We look at it's kind of that nature versus nurture piece. So we look at our basic factors, who we are internally, how we're wired, and then we look at environmental factors and who you are at your core. And those questions are designed to get to those. Remember, I said that 51-49. Who you are at your core will remain consistent over time. Your environmental factors will change. So you may see, oh wow, at 40%, I am a supportive style. I'm a team player. That's who I am at my heart. But I'm now leading a nonprofit. You may see that's going up to a 70% because you're utilizing those characteristics. But if you're not in that role anymore, you may see that go down, but it's never going to go lower than it was. That's who you are at your core. But, there's always going to be factors from your environment that are going to take, some characteristics that you're going to use more than the others, but who you are at your core will remain constant over time.
What could
So
you
if you are, I'm sorry, I forget what your results were. Were you an I? I think you were.
I'd have to dig it up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have had that. But if you were an I 5 years ago, you're going to be an I now, and an I in another 5 years if you want to take it again,
Okay,
because that's
interesting.
how you're hardwired.
And talk, if you would, the ideal company or organization that this would be helpful for. Are there any that are particularly this would be a great thing for them to check out?
I mean, it's interesting because I work across so many different industries, and anybody who really is working with a team, this is valuable for, because you're working with each other, you're relying on each other, you were hired for a reason, whether it's to, hit a revenue goal, drive product sales, create a product, market a product, whatever it is, you were hired to do that. If you're not working cohesively as a team, you're not going to hit any of those targets. So I think anybody that's looking to improve communication with their team, increase morale with their team, if there's conflict within the team, this is definitely a great tool to use. But I also use it in a lot of my leadership and executive coaching one-on-one sessions, where it's just getting that insight in, what do I need to work on? What do I need to be more aware of in this particular role that I'm in? And what about my future role? Is this going to be, what do I need to focus on for the next level in my career?
Listen to you.
So
I'm
it's
so sorry.
really, I'm not sure if that answers your question,
No,
but
it does,
it's
because
pretty much everybody. Yeah.
But as you're saying, I'm thinking out loud, which is always a good thing. I'm thinking it's too bad I didn't know you way back when in my Bucks County Community College days, because boy,
Yeah.
would I have loved to have had, I was head of the teachers union. I would have loved to have had you work with us, because that's another thing that doesn't typically happen. Um, Companies don't, or certain organizations don't have people to work with them. You don't have people helping motivate them, helping them understand. Have you worked with teachers or unions before?
I don't know if I should say this, but I may have done some work with Bucks County Community College.
Okay, may have. Okay.
But
Well,
it's an interesting take on, it's a test. It's
right.
an assessment. And so, you get that. And I always start by, there's no right or wrong answer. There's no, bad or good personality. Not one's better than the other. It's, are you in the right role to be successful? That's really what it comes down to.
Great question. I'm just saying, boy, I would have loved to have worked with you way back when. If folks want to work with you, Kathy, the best bet to find out more information about what you do and about your consulting business is what?
Yeah, my website is kmmdisc.com, DISC, like the tool.com. Also, I'd like to tell people to check out my LinkedIn profile, which is my name, Kathleen Marcino, because it does show, I have a lot of different posts out there. I share a lot of information from my colleagues and folks that I work with about conflict in the workplace, communication in the workplace. Right now, a hot topic is we've got 5 generations in a workplace right now.
Right.
So think about your own family sitting around the table and communicating at 5 different generations and now working in that environment. We talk about the texters, right? So we've got the texters and then we've got people with the Rolodex. So it's very interesting now. So my LinkedIn is Kathleen Marcino. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook, KMM Consulting,
I'm thinking,
which is my company name.
wow, would that be some experience also for some family reunion to do this? I don't know if you've ever done that, but can you imagine getting,
Yeah.
I'm thinking out loud and I'll tell you off the air what I'm thinking of, but that would be some experience, to get people from different generations, like you said. Have you ever done that? Have you ever done this for a family
I
or family?
haven't done it with different generations, but I wrote a blog about, has to be at least 5 years ago, maybe even longer than that, about how to have a less stressful Thanksgiving. And I just touched on the 4 personality styles, not the generations.
Right.
So I should actually update that blog now and say, now we've got 4 personality styles, but we've got 5 generations. So even if they're the same style, if you're 18 versus 68, you're going to have a completely different reaction and response, right? So thanks for that suggestion. So that blog is on my website if you want to see it. It's pretty funny.
Okay, I'll check it out and I'll invite you to, when you do the revision. I'd love to see it, and then I'll run in my blog with your permission. But it'd be a great piece to see.
Oh, that would be, yeah, I would love that.
What an eye-opening opportunity. Anyway, Kathy Marcino, I'd like to thank you for being my guest on this edition of Blaine's World website. I also like to
Thank
thank my
you.
producer, Cappy Fassetti, and we'll see you hopefully sometime in person at a Dementia Society event. That'd
I
be
hope
great.
so too. Thanks so much.
Okay, appreciate it.